You have one precious life. How will you make your money work for you? It's time for Sage Money Conversations, where your financial happiness and confidence are always the subject. Here's your host, Certified Financial Planner, Barbara Norman.
Hello and welcome to Sage Money Conversations. I'm your host, Barbara Norman. Today we're talking about Investing 101. The reason for this is I get a lot of people in my office and they don't know what investments they own. They don't know why they have them. Even worse, they don't know how much they're paying for them. So let me illustrate why this is important. A couple of years ago, I bought a car. It's a BMW X3. Now, when I bought this car, I bought it coming out of a lease. And I love buying my cars that way because when a car comes out of a lease, not only did the person have to service it, the miles have to be low, they get dinged for every little scrape and scratch. So I know the car is well taken care of. But even better, somebody else drove the first $25,000 off that car. I got a killer deal. What I loved about the car is it checked off all of the boxes that I wanted. It had the wood package. It has this yummy, creamy leather interior. In the back, I can throw in my plants and my dirt for when I want to garden. When I go to art class, it fits my big canvases. And if I want to go camping, I can roll the seats down and sleep in the car. So car was great. First time I took my car to my corner mechanic to get it checked out and get it serviced, I walked in and I'm across the counter from my car guy, and he starts asking me all kinds of questions about my engine. Is it a V this? Is it a something that? Is it a, and he kept asking me these questions and I kept saying, I don't know. I don't know. And finally I looked at him and I said, look, it's gray. And he looked at me and he goes, you're cute. Okay, that was really funny. But you know what? In that moment, I realized how vulnerable I am. He knows that I don't know squat about cars. And if he wanted to take advantage of me that day, he could have. And I trusted that he wouldn't. So what does that have to do with investments? I never want you to have a it's gray moment. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's talk about investments. First of all, my industry is very complex. It lacks transparency, and we do the best job confusing you. When we look at investments, we put it, we call it, we short it, we wrap it, we hedge it, we put it into mutual funds, annuities, we put it into ETFs, we put it into life insurance. We wrap this stuff up in so many different ways, and it can be so confusing, but it doesn't have to be. So let's boil it down to three simple things. When you're buying an investment, it's going to fall into one of three categories: cash, bonds, or stocks. They can wrap it all they want. They can design it all they want, but three things: cash, bonds, and stocks. So let's talk about what those do. First is cash. Cash is cash. It's just that. It's there. It's liquid. It's not tied up. If you need to put your hands on it, you can. It's safe. But what about cash? What's it earning? Like nothing right now. Cash, if you're getting 1%, you're lucky, but inflation is running super high right now. So if you have all your money in cash, you're probably not going to make it to retirement unless you're saving very, very aggressively. We also know cash is safe. Just know one thing. We hear this thing, FDIC insurance. Well, your accounts can be insured up to $250,000 if it says FDIC insurance. But you might have a money market account that's paying a little bit higher than your FDIC insured account. And that's because they're not buying that insurance. And so if you have cash and you're concerned about bank default, you're going to want to ask, is this FDIC insured? So there's cash. My recommendation to you is that you have enough cash for 6 months in an emergency fund or whatever your number is that makes you comfortable, but make sure you have enough to get through emergencies. Now we have to talk about investing. So the next place on the risk spectrum is a bond. So what is a bond? Well, when you buy a bond, you're basically loaning money to somebody. So if I loan money to my friend Melissa, that loan is not going to grow, right? She's only going to pay back principal plus interest. So if I loan money to Melissa, there's a couple of things I want to know, right? Like, when are you going to pay it back and how are you going to pay it back? And so a bond is the same thing. It might be a 10-year bond or a 5-year bond or a 20-year bond. And that bond, so we know it's going to pay you back over that period of time. We know you're going to get an interest rate. And the question is, when does it pay? Some bonds will pay a monthly income. Some bonds will pay quarterly or semi-annually or annually. Some bonds might not pay anything until the bond matures. It doesn't matter. What you want to know is this bond fitting my income needs, right? We're not buying bonds to grow. Loans don't grow, but they do pay income. And so we need to ask ourselves, when I buy this bond, when do I need the income? Do I need it monthly, quarterly? Maybe I don't need it till retirement. And so you're going to want to look at how long is my bond? When does the income pay? Does that fit what I need? Now, what are the risks in a bond? Well, there's a risk that someone might not pay it back, right? If I'm giving it to my friend Melissa, she could pay it back. She could default on it. Same thing is true of bonds. And so when you go to look at a bond, you can almost tell from the name of the bond who you're loaning money to. Is it a government bond? Well, you're loaning to the government. Is it a high yield corporate bond? Another word for junk bonds. You're loaning money to a corporation. Is it a foreign bond? Well, shoot, I'm going to want to know, am I loaning money to Greece or Italy or Spain? China, Japan? Who am I loaning money to? And can they pay it back? And so just like you or I, one of the mistakes that I see when people buy a bond is they'll run down a list and it's like, this one's paying 2 or 3%, not so exciting. Well, this one's paying 5 or 6%. Maybe I'll buy that bond. Well, when you and I go to buy a car or a house or anything else, if we have bad credit, what happens? Well, we have to pay a higher interest rate, right? And if we have really good credit, well, our interest rates are lower. So the same thing is true of bonds. We want to look at the ratings. If we have really good ratings, well, we're going to pay a low interest rate, but that means your risk is less. That means the chance of getting your money paid back is even better. Where if somebody has poor ratings, you're going to get a higher interest rate, but your risk of default is higher. So if you're looking at bonds, you also want to know, what is your credit risk? Like, what is the chance that this is going to get paid back? Because people can and they have defaulted on bonds. The other risk that we have, other than default risk in bonds, is we have what's called interest rate risk. So with interest rate risk, what that says is we know that interest rates go up and interest rates go down. Right now, we're in an environment where interest rates are going up really rapidly, more than we ever thought. And so when the interest rates go up, the value of bonds actually goes down. Why is that? Well, let's say that I'm holding a bond at 3% and I bought that bond for $10,000 and now interest rates went up to 4%. Let's say that I want my $10,000 and I want my money back and I can go to market and I can try and sell my bond. Well, someone's going to look at me and says, yeah, your bond's paying 3%. I can buy one at 4%. I'll buy your bond, but I'm not giving you $10,000. Maybe I'm only giving you $7,500 for it. So when interest rates go up, the value of bonds go down. So we have to be really careful with that. When interest rates are going up, it might be a good time to buy bonds. We know that when markets start getting rough, right, what do? They start dropping interest rates to stimulate the economy. So if I'm hanging on to a long-term bond, that's kind of a good thing. So interest rate risk can work for us too. If I'm holding a bond with high interest rates go down, someone might say, I'll pay you a premium for your bond because I want that income in my retirement. So that's interest rate and bonds. The next thing is inflation risk. So right now, when we're seeing 6-8% inflation, but bonds are only paying 3 or 4%, well, shoot, we know we're losing purchasing power. And so inflation can kind of erode the value of our bonds. And that's not a good thing. So that in a nutshell is bonds. When are you going to pay it back? 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20? Are you going to pay it back at what interest rate? And how often are you going to pay interest? So I'd want to know, when is this paying? When am I going to get my money back? Will it pay my bills? And does it fit my needs? And then I'm going to also want to know too, what is it costing me to buy these bonds? And we'll go into fees a little bit later. So that's a bond. You're loaning money to somebody, predictable income, but it's not going to grow. Well, with inflation, and we know we want things to grow. So after cash and after bonds, now we have stocks. So with stocks, you actually own an interest in a company. That's pretty cool. So when you buy a stock in a market, you might own shares of Apple, you're going to own shares of Amazon or whatever it is that you're buying. So there's two things to look out for in stocks. The first thing is it a small cap stock, a medium cap stock, or a large cap stock? If I have a large company stock, that might be your Google, Amazon, Facebook's, Johnson & Johnson's, Walmart's, Walgreens. We know what those companies do. They're going to click along. They're just going to keep going. Pretty predictable. You're going to get paid in two ways on a stock. You're going to get the up and down of the stock. And if it's doing well, you're going to get a dividend, right? Because if the company is earning money, they got to give that earnings back to you. So we're going to get the up and down. We're going to get the dividend. But the nice thing is if it's a large company stock, it's going to be pretty predictable. Versus, let's say, a small company stock. Let's say that I want to invest in a company that might have the next game-changing gene therapy. And wow, my risk is going to be really high in that, right? They could easily fail. If they succeed, it's going to go through the roof. So we know that if we're buying a small company stock, the potential is so much greater, but also the risk is so much greater. So if I'm buying something in a stock, I want to know, is it small, medium, or large? And does this match how much risk I can take in my portfolio now? If I'm young or if I'm a risk taker, great, go for it. But if I want consistency and I can't take those ups and downs in the market, well, maybe a large company stock is better for you. The other thing that you're going to hear besides small, medium, and large cap stocks, you're also going to hear two words, growth and value. Is this a growth stock or is this a value stock? What's a value stock? A value says, for some reason, this stock is out of favor. It's kind of a counterintuitive word, isn't it? Value. So value says, here's an example, Boeing. Do you remember when Boeing's planes were dropping out of the sky and they were being sued and they were being fined? Boeing stock went out of favor. That became a value stock because for some reason it was out of favor. And so when you buy value stocks, just know that you have more risk versus a growth stock that says, we know what this company's doing. It's growing. It's kind of clicking along and it's paying dividends. And so look at value, look at growth. Do you want more risk and more opportunity? That would say value. Do you want more predictability? That might say growth. So I'd be looking at, do I have large value? Do I have small, medium, and large? Let's talk about stocks because you can get an income off of stocks and that's pretty great. If a company is earning, right, they want to be able to give you those earnings back. That's how their executives get paid. That's how we get paid. So they're going to give you dividends. So unlike a loan where the interest rates are predictable, it's written into the contract, we know what it's going to happen. That's not so true in stocks. Every year, the board of directors gets to say when they're going to pay a dividend and how much. And so they can say, gee, we've had a rough year. It's been the pandemic. People aren't spending money on X, Y, and Z. We're going to pay less of a dividend or we're going to pay no of a dividend. Or conversely, they could come and say, wow, we've had a great year. Let's give a little bit higher dividend than we normally would. So just know that you can get income in stocks. Just know that it's not predictable. So if you're investing on your own, you might want to be looking at what are your monthly needs? Do I have enough income coming in, base plan to pay my bills? And then how much do I need for discretionary? And you might want to match your stocks and bonds with how your budgets work. If you are working with an advisor, you're going to want to ask them, hey, how do I get my monthly bills paid? What's predictable? What's not predictable? How much am I paying for this? How is this portfolio designed and why? And is it there to fit you? That's what we want to make sure is it's there to fit your budget. With my clients, we are always looking at their budget. We're always looking at the income coming in. When I see a down market like this, I see that the markets are going up and the markets are going down. My biggest thing for my clients is, do you have the income you need to get through retirement and to still have fun and to not cash out when things are bad? And so no matter who you're working with, make sure that your investments are designed to fit your needs, your risk, and nobody else's. So stocks, bonds, cash, that's all it is. Now, when you go to buy an investment, you're probably not buying individual stocks and bonds, right? That would be pretty expensive to do. You wouldn't have a lot of diversification. So you're going to buy your investments wrapped up in some kind of a package. And that package might be a mutual fund. It might be an ETF or an exchange traded fund. It might be an annuity. It might be in a life insurance policy. I'm going to table annuities and life insurance for another discussion because they're very complex, but I will touch on them because I need to. So let's look at this. What is a mutual fund? What is an exchange traded fund ETF? They both work basically the same. Mutual funds and ETFs, the fund managers are going to put all of the stocks, they're going to buy lots of different stocks, and they're going to put it together in a package for you. And you can almost tell what you're buying. Your mutual fund might say it's the XYZ company large cap growth fund, or it might be the small cap value fund, or it might say medium cap blend fund, meaning you're buying medium stock companies and you have both value and growth funds. So you've got a nice diversification, and it's up to the fund manager to decide, do we want to swing more value or more growth? So mutual funds, the fund managers have an objective. You buy into that objective, large, medium, small, value, growth. They can never vary off of that. So let's say that value stocks are out of favor right now. They still have to keep buying value stocks. So the fund managers are going to put together all these investments for you. You're going to buy those in a mutual fund and or an exchange traded fund. The biggest difference between a mutual fund and an exchange traded fund is tax efficiency. I will tell you right now, last year in 2021, people who owned mutual funds outside of their retirement plans got burned. They got burned badly in a lot of cases. So what happened was, the mutual fund managers inside of that basket of investments started selling off stocks and different things, and they kicked off gains, and the gains were pretty big. Now, these were not gains that went into your pocket. These were not gains that reinvested. It was just money inside that mutual fund that you had to pay taxes on. And this frosted my cookies because there was a lot of people that had to pay taxes on high gains that they didn't put in their pocket. And it may have messed up their Medicare premiums. It may have messed up their ACA funding. It wasn't fair. And so if you have a mutual fund and it's not in your IRA or your 401k, I would want to be looking at that really hard. Like, are you paying taxes on money that you don't get the value of, that you don't get to use? So if you're self-investing, be looking at your statements from last year. Did I have to pay taxes on gains that I didn't get to enjoy? If you're with a fund manager, definitely in my review, I'd want to know, hey, what were the gains last year? In my portfolios, we're always looking at what are the tax ramifications of this mutual fund? Does it have a place? I am more and more trying to get mutual funds out of my portfolios just because I don't like those tax surprises. Now let's talk about what is an exchange traded fund. It's basically the same thing, but it's tax efficient. It doesn't kick those off. So that's the difference between a mutual fund and an exchange traded fund. Okay, have I bored you yet? Let's move on to how do we pay for these things? So fees are important. When I look at different mutual funds or ETFs, I am always looking at the fees. There's two layers of fees, if you will. The first is the management fee. That's what you pay the mutual fund company or the ETF company, right? They have computers and they have compliance and employees and office buildings. They have to charge something. And it surprises me that people don't know how much they're paying for things. So we're going to want to know what the fees are in the management, and then also what is the advisor getting paid. Now, why are fees important? Well, I did a little calculation for you. You ready for this? If I have $250,000 over 20 years, and let's say that I can get 8.5%, in 20 years, at 8.5%, my $250,000 is going to grow to $1,278,000. That's pretty cool. Let's say that inside my mutual fund, the fees were kind of high, and now it was 1% more than that. And so now I'm only going to get 7.5%, not 8.5%. So if I take $250,000 over 20 years at 7.5%, not 8.5%, I only have $1,062,000. The difference is $216,000. Okay, I like to travel. That's a lot of trips. You might want to pay off your house. That's paying off your house. And so pay attention to fees, because you should not be giving that money to anybody else. It should be going in your pocket. So be very, very fee sensitive. And if you're not understanding this, give me a call, come into my office. We will put an X-ray on your investments and we will start looking at things, because I've had people come into my office and it turns out we could keep the same mutual fund, but we could shift it over to a different share class, and we've saved clients thousands of dollars a year in fees. It can be done. So give me a call and let's take a look at those fees. The other thing is, who are you working with? So a little bit about my past. I worked for a long time with a large company. And for a long time, I did their training. They trained beautifully. But at some point, I stopped drinking the Kool-Aid. I finally started doing my own education, and my biggest one was on fees. And I'll never forget, one day I was walking down the hall and our regional senior president, vice president was in the office, walking the halls too. And you know who they are. They're like these people that show up in your office 2, 3, 4 times a year. They're not in the trenches. They're just telling you how to do your job. And I'm not sure why we're paying them, but I stopped this guy in the hall and I said, hey, how come I have to sell this fund? I want to be able to sell this fund. And he looked at me and he said, this is your list of mutual funds that you can sell. That's it. Well, the difference in fees was really, really high. And in that moment, I realized, I think I'm paying for this guy to walk down the hall, criticize the way I'm working. I'm not getting anything out of this, and it's not serving my clients. And yes, I fired that company. I went to work and I started working independently because I didn't need to pay those huge middle management fees. I didn't need to pay for large companies to tell me what I can and cannot sell. My loyalty is to my clients. So who are you working with? You might be working with a large company and that gives you lots of peace of mind, but what fees are you paying as a result of it? Are you working with an independent advisor, right? Who can have more architecture over your investments, but where is the oversight? And so there's a lot of fear in this. And I think that's where you need to start vetting your advisor better. So the advisors, let's talk about them. Do you know what the average educational requirement is for someone to work and be a financial advisor? Now, if this answer doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. The average educational requirement for someone to be a financial advisor is a high school education, and you got to pass 2 tests. That's it. Your whole life savings, who is managing that money? What scares me even more, I was reading in my financial planning magazine about a year ago. My industry has over 222 designations. Some of those only require a fee and no continuing education. Honestly, when I first started in this industry, I went to the Marriott Hotel in Del Mar. I had a bad chicken dinner. I had a bad glass of wine. I sat through an annuity presentation. I now have my CFP, Certified Financial Planner, that says you have to have a college education. You have to go through rigorous courses. You have to pass rigorous tests. You have ongoing continuing education and ethics requirements. You have to work 3 to 5 years before you can use that CFP designation. Be very, very careful who you are talking to. If you are given a card and it's got lots of alphabet soup after their name, that should scare you. That should really, really scare you because you don't know what in the heck that means. It might look impressive. It might mean squat. So vet your advisors for their education. Let's talk about experience because the year is 2022. We're heading into a recession, no doubt about it. If you have an advisor that's worked for 10 years, 2012, our last big recession was 2008. If they have 15 years of education, okay, but how many clients did they have in 2008? And so I'd be looking for some gray hairs to get me through this market because there's not a lot of experience out there. So those are your advisors. That's the education. That's the experience. Now let's talk about how do advisors get paid? So when I started in this industry, the only way to do this was to be a commissioned salesperson. And so what did that mean? I would go do some financial planning for somebody. We'd sit down. I'd sell them some investments. I'd get paid a nice commission. Next month, I had to pay my bills. So I went on to the next person, did some financial planning, sold them some investments, got paid a commission. And the third month and the fourth month, every month I had to bring on a new client to get paid. Now, what happened to those clients that I talked to a year or 2 or 5 years ago? I don't get paid to go back and help them, right? So they get ignored. At one point, I had over 2,200 clients, and I went to my company and I said, I can't take it anymore. Please take some of these off my plate, which they did. I won't even begin to tell you how they treated me over that one. But where did those people go that I rejected? Well, they went to the rookie in the bullpen. Now, for me to go and sell those people a new investment, it would have been churning and it would have been illegal. However, new advisor, young advisor, they could sell a new product. It could be commissioned again. And by the way, that's not churning. That's totally legal. So if you're working with someone, the question is, how are you guys getting paid? If you're commission only, I'd be afraid because they get paid one time. So they serve you that day. The investment has to be appropriate at the time of sale, but it doesn't mean it has to be appropriate ongoing for you. So nobody's looking after you once you've paid that commission. So are you a commissioned salesperson versus are you a fiduciary, a fee-only advisor? Now, I will tell you, commissioned person, if you buy an investment, you paid a commission, and this makes me so angry, you never see a line item on your statement that says you paid a commission. No transparency whatsoever. Versus if you are working with a fee-only fiduciary, you are paying them and you negotiate that fee with them. And that fee might be 1% a year or 1.5% a year. I don't know. You've got to ask. But that is fully transparent. You see that line item on your statement and you know how much you're paying. It's scary. I'm not lying. But it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So when you are sitting with an advisor, you have got to ask them, how do you get paid and how much are you getting paid? I would never sit down at a restaurant, open up a menu and just start ordering things without knowing how much I'm going to pay for it. I would never go buy clothes or shoes without knowing how much I would get paid for it, how much I pay for it. So the question is, why are you buying investments and not knowing how you are paying for them? So let's go back to commission person. Only got to make sure it's suitable at the time of sale versus a fee-only fiduciary. They have to sit on your side of the table. They have to make sure that your concerns are the first and foremost priority, right? Commissioned. Remember walking down the hall and that guy said, this is your list of mutual funds that you can sell them. First priority was to the company. The second priority was to my client. A fee-only fiduciary, you are the first priority. Second thing is your investments have to be appropriate at all times. So a fee-only fiduciary has to be on top of it and they have to justify their fees and they have to justify their ongoing work. So we read again and again, you want to be working with a fee-only fiduciary. Let me warn you of one thing. There are people out there who are called hybrid advisors. They'll sell you some things that are commissioned and some things that are fee-only. That's not fair. So let's be transparent with this. Let's vet those advisors. What's your education? How long have you been doing this? What is your oversight? How are you getting paid? So yeah, I've talked about a lot of things today and we'll be doing this more, but I just wanted to give you that working language to sit down and say, what do I have? Is it cash? Is it stocks? Is it bonds? What is the mix? Most important thing, does it fit my objectives? I have this life and I have these expensive and I have things that I want to do. Are you working for me? Are you like putting my investments where it's going to like fit my goals and objectives and my happiness? Or are you working for you? And the other thing is, what is the experience? How much you're getting paid? If the difference means a couple $100,000 less at retirement, holy cow, you don't want to be doing that. Your first priority should be yourself. Okay, I've talked enough today. I hope I haven't bored you. As always, you can go onto my website, sagepathsolutions.com. Click on the learning tab. You can learn more. We love our listeners. If you want to come in and get your portfolio analyzed, give me a call. Let's talk about what's going on in your portfolio, how much you're paying for it, and does it fit you? I am passionate about this stuff. I care about you. Stay tuned because next week we're going to be talking about the 5 F words in financial planning. Those are huge too. Anyways, have a great day. Look forward to seeing you the next time.
Advisory services are offered through Barbara J. Norman, LLC, an investment advisor in the states of California and Texas. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell, nor an offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of California, or where otherwise legally permitted. All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decisions. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to be complete analysis of the materials discussed. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of SagePath Solutions and are subject to change without notice.